On the agenda tonight, we have our first ever live analysis video. We're going to be taking a look at Steve Winwood, and he's going to be performing John Barleycorn, Must Die. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to the first ever live analysis. Thank you guys for joining me. I can see you there in the chat room: Cindy, Linda, King Nero, Walter, Terry, Neil, Lynn, Lucy, all the moderators in the house tonight as well. So we're going to be doing this exactly the same way as a normal analysis video. We'll be jumping into the performance probably about halfway through. So as always, the link to the performance that I'm watching is going to be in the description below, so you guys can check it out there if you want to in full after this live stream. And we'll have to see how this stream goes. Fingers crossed it will be okay and that you can hear me and everything is working, but we will see. We'll get Steve up on screen. We'll have a little listen through. As I said, we'll jump in, but fingers crossed the levels are okay, and let's jump into this.
There were three men came out of the west. Their fortunes for to try, and these three men made a solemn oath: John Barleycorn must die. They've plowed, they've sown, they've harrowed him in through clods upon his head, and these three men made a solemn oath: John Barleycorn was dead. They've let him lie for a very long time, till the rains from heaven did fall, and little Sir John sprung up his head, and so amazed them all. They let him stand till Midsummer's Day, till he looked both pale and wan. And these three men made a solemn oath on board John Barleycorn.
I'm just going to jump in here. This is such a great video for so many reasons, because we get to see Steve playing the guitar. I know that a lot of people always focus on his piano playing and organ, especially, of course, but playing the guitar here, you can really see his picking technique, the fact that we are flat picking here throughout, and there is a lot of technique going on with that right hand, which we will get into, and I'll go through the chords as well. We are going to be capoed on the 7th fret here if you have got your guitars out and you're wanting to play along. But it's the blend of rhythm with the right hand and picking at the same time. But really cool technique, because you get to see how great a guitarist Steve is, and singing at the same time. Doing that at the same time, I always say, doubles the difficulty. But we definitely have that. And thank you, by the way, King Nero, for that donation. Orlando in there as well. And thank you for joining me tonight on this live analysis. But getting into his voice, I mean, we've got to mention it, even though we will be focusing on the guitar. Steve's voice is one of those standalone voices, and one of the voices of my youth, because his album was one of those that was in the car all the time on tape back in those days, and that was back in the High Life, I do believe, 1986, so quite a while ago now. But such a great album, and his voice was unique in that way that you always knew that it was Steve singing, because he's got this richness to his tone, but also that hint of rasp that is there throughout, and it's just a warmth of a sound even in his lower range like we've got here. He isn't hitting the A4s or B4s or C5s, which he could definitely do, and D5s as well, just crazy range in the male tenor range. But here with the lower range that he's singing in, you still get that little bit of grit and rasp in there, but it's so well controlled, and it's so smooth sounding, such a nice voice to listen to. And considering that Steve was one of those child prodigies and started playing piano at age 4, by the way, as well as performing live with his dad and his brother when he was 8 years of age. And back in those days, I mean, in the UK, they're playing at licensed bars and clubs. So it meant that they had to hide Steve behind the piano. They'd turn it round, and because he was obviously underage, you had to be over 18 to actually play in a band, but also to buy alcohol, of course. But hiding Steve behind the piano is something that they had to do in those early days when he played with his older brother and his dad. But getting back into this performance, by the way, Eddie, thank you for that donation as well. Getting back into the guitar playing, the way that Steve just combines the rhythm and the picking together. I'm going to roll up my sleeves, and I'll make myself full screen here so you guys will be able to see what I'm doing here on the guitar, and hopefully you'll be able to hear this and it's going to be ringing out. But like I said, we've got our capo on the 7th fret here, and for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be playing through it and referring to the chord shapes in exactly the same way that you would if you're playing in standard tuning at the bottom of the guitar, because obviously if we're playing a D here, it's actually an A when you look at it without the capo and the change in tuning because of that. So I'm just going to call out the chords, and we're going to be playing the D. This isn't going to be an instructional video, but I do want to draw attention to the way that Steve is using this right hand, and then when we resume the video, you can have a little look out for it and get a bit more of an appreciation of the work that's going on. And you might see Steve look at his right hand now and again when we get into just the guitar parts, just the breaks between those vocals, just to make sure that he's getting that picking right. But the most important thing that we've got here is this blending of rhythm and picking. So to start with our D, he's playing that D string, picking down, and then coming back up the strings from the E, the B, and down to the G, like that. And the important thing about this cycle on the right hand is if we were strumming this and going, we'd have a down, down, up, up, down, like that. So it means that when he's going to be picking the strings, we've got down, down, up, up, down. And I'm hoping that you can hear my voice over the top of the guitar, because the pick directions are exactly the same as if you were strumming with that right hand. So it means that for all of the chords, like that. And look out for that little A minor down to the sus2. Take off your first finger, and in order to get that sus2 sound. It's a change that Steve's going to throw in there pretty much every time he goes to that A minor. But getting into that picking, it means that when you get used to this strumming, you can then start to apply the picking and just approach it from that angle of still going in the same direction as you would normally be strumming. Down, down, up, up, down, down, up, down, up, like that. So once you've got that, you start to get that kind of sound. And it's good in the way that Steve is filling out the sound by sometimes hitting 2 strings, maybe 3 strings, but he's still doing it with this approach of picking on the right hand, but because he's going in the right direction for strumming, it can turn into this. So you're still hearing each string pop out because I'm applying that slightly freer movement of the right hand, but still having an element of picking in there. So it means it's going to fill in the sound, which is exactly what you want when you're playing acoustic guitar and singing at the same time. This is something that Steve is doing both things at the same time. So he's got all of this subconscious, and by allowing that pick just to go a little bit further, it's going to fill in the sound. And we're not getting a really and single notes like that. It's just hitting those more than 1 string at a time, which has a lot of technique to it. This isn't something that you can just pick up the guitar and start to implement the strumming action on the right hand and pick out notes individually. It takes a lot of practice to find where these strings are in the first place, and even getting that down to the sus2. You want that to pop out, and it does every time Steve plays it. And that's the point, that his technique on the guitar is spot on with the picking, then when he opens it up a little bit, but every line that you want to hear does pop out. And by the way, thank you Marge for that donation, and Renee as well, who's in there, and Lynn, who has donated $50. Thank you so much for that. So, having this approach of the rhythm, it is a great way to start expanding on your picking, and it's all about keeping that right hand moving in the same direction as you normally would do with your standard strumming pattern. Like that. And obviously in the intro, it might be a little bit more open when you're hearing Steve play it, because that sound is filling in. When we get into the verse, you might start to hear those single notes being applied, because it is dynamically going to bring things down a little bit, and that's exactly what you want when there's a vocal over the top of the guitar. So it's just more single notes underneath the singing. But again, this is all Steve's technique, his ability in order to do this while singing and bring it all down underneath his vocal. It's really impressive stuff from pretty much every angle that you're looking at it. I mean, vocally, just to have this quality of vocal over the top, Steve's voice, you could listen to that just on its own, but also listening to this, you can imagine a guy playing acoustic guitar in the background and Steve just standing there or sitting there with a mic, because of the quality of the guitar work. And this is why it's great to put a spotlight on Steve's guitar playing, because it's something that doesn't really get a lot of attention when people listen to him sing, because it is one of those show-stopping vocals and it's unmistakable. People are going to be focusing on that with his range and the quality, but his guitar work is top-notch as well. And multi-instrumentalist, by the way, you know, it's not just the guitar that he has worked on. He's got so much ability. And let me just throw in there as well about when he started playing, and he would still be at school, but be playing for other bands, and he got signed when he was 16 years of age, and that was to Island Records. And then when he was 10 days older than 16, he had his first #1, which is crazy to think of. And this is probably about in the mid-60s. We're talking maybe 1964, 1965. But that was Keep On Running, by the way, that first #1. But to have the ability for writing as well, to have that voice, to have the multi-instrumental ability, you can understand why he has been referred to and is referred to as a child prodigy when he was growing up. And Island Records said that as soon as they signed Steve, loads of other artists started contacting Island Records because they wanted to be on the same label as Steve Winwood. So that gives you an idea of his popularity and his ability and the respect that he had at such an early age from other people within the industry. But we are going to be jumping back into this and have a little look out now for that right hand and the work that he's getting through, just making those notes pop out when he wants them to. By the way, thank you Marilyn as well for that $10 donation. We are going to be jumping straight back into this video and we will get him back on screen to begin with. Hopefully that's worked out and we'll watch it all the way to the end.
They've hired men with the scythe so sharp to cut him off at the knee. They rolled him and tied him by the waist, serving him most barbarously. They've hired men with the sharp pitchforks who pricked him to the heart. And the Lord he has served him worse than that, for he's bound him to the cart. They've wheeled them around and around a field till they came onto a barn, and there they've made a solemn oath on poor John Barleycorn. They've hired men with the crabtree sticks to court him skin from bone. And the miller he has served him worse than that, for he's ground him between two stones. And little Sir John and the nut brown bull, and his brandy in the glass. And little Sir John and the nut brown bull proved the strongest man at last. The huntsman he can't hunt the fox, nor so loudly to blow his horn. And the tinker he can't mend kettle nor pots without a little barley corn.
And there we have it. Just resolving to the major at the end there. Really nice in terms of the overall sound, just to finish it, because we do have a lot of minor chords going on. Well, with the A minor, we're always going back to that A minor like I mentioned. There is a D minor right at the beginning of that pre-chorus, and just to point out as well that here, from a technical perspective, playing wise, because we've got this capo on the 7th fret, or capo, depending on where you're from or how you want to pronounce it, having this capo on the 7th fret, it means that things are really tight. If you are playing chords up here, trying to get the strings to ring out, not leaning on another string by accident, you do have to factor this in when you are playing it. So you might have noticed when we get into that D and the C and the G, the A minor and that D minor as well, it's all really tight here. But it's always really clean playing from Steve. Also, look out for the way that we get down into this E sus4 shape, and normally you would play the E and then have the little finger in there. In order to get that sound, and that was jumping in with the sus4 with my little finger and then coming off, coming back on again. With Steve's playing, because everything is so tight up here, I'm lucky in that my hands are a little bit smaller, but you'll see the way that Steve approaches this chord of the E sus4, he's playing it like this. So you might actually see players sometimes playing an A chord down at the bottom of the guitar with all 3 fingers, but with the first finger in between the 2nd and the 3rd. And this is all about what you find most comfortable, especially up this high. You'll see Steve getting into this position like that, and then he switches over to this E7 shape. And he doesn't even do what I did there, which was supplying the sus4 with the 3rd finger. He actually goes and moves his first finger up and down. So it is interesting to see the way that players all play things differently. It's all to do with your own physiology and how big your hands are, how small your hands are. But Steve is just using this technique in order to get the cleanest sound possible up high on the fretboard, because things do get really tight up here, like I mentioned. So having this approach will also make the change to that E7th chord a little bit easier, because the first finger just has to pop over there, and then he just jumps up and down with that first finger. Obviously, it's up to you how you want to approach this, but it's good in that if you are playing your E sus4 and you're getting a little bit of buzzing going on, of fingers leaning on another string, you can just apply a little bit of a different technique like Steve's doing here, experiment with that, and you might find that it helps getting that 3rd finger a little bit higher up on that G string, away from that B, in order to get a cleaner sound on it. But that's what we've got here from Steve. It's again one of those technical aspects of playing that you might not notice. In order to keep this all really clean, that is something that you've got to make sure happens, because you don't want to be picking through chords and just have a mess, because nobody's going to like the sound of that. Obviously, we're talking about Steve Winwood here, so he's got the technical ability in order to nail this on the guitar at the same time as singing. So let me just also say thank you for the donations coming in during this live analysis. It's not something that I was expecting, but thank you guys. I'll just give a quick shout out. Thank you, Kathleen, for that $10. Also, 5150 Ripley, who has donated $5. Thank you for that. Lucy has donated $2.99. Thank you for that. And Michelle has donated $20. Thank you, Michelle. And Deborah has donated $19.99 as well. So thank you for that, Deborah. So getting back to the analysis, I don't want the analysis video to go on for too long, because I just want this to be exactly the same as the other analysis videos, just to sit in there so people can watch this maybe for 15 or 20 minutes. I know that we've probably gone on a little bit longer than normal, just because of the fact that I'm explaining things about the guitar and I do sometimes get a bit sidetracked. But just to mention finally in closing, because I've just looked at the clock and it is 25 past midnight. By the way, if you're watching this for the first time. I'm going to be doing these on Wednesday nights, and I start at 12 midnight Greenwich Mean Time, so you can tune in then if you want to watch it live, or you can catch up with it afterwards. It doesn't matter. You can also hit that thumbs up. It all helps to get live streams out there a little bit more, and maybe get a few more people watching this. But thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. Orlando, Barry, Reb, and Paul, Laurie, Neil moderating in there, Lynn and Reb, Deborah's in there, Corey as well, Karen's in the house. So thank you guys. And Bonnie, thank you for that $10 donation, and Karen as well for your $5 donation, and King Nero for the $5 donation as well. It is massively appreciated. So just a final word on Steve Winwood, because he's one of those artists that's had such a long and successful career. Like I said, he's a voice certainly of my youth, and particularly Higher Love, that song with, by the way, Shaka Khan in the background supplying those vocals. Whenever I'm singing that back in my head, you can't mistake that vocal of Shaka Khan in the background as well. Just such great compositions. And it's also the fact that when he was at school, he was still playing professionally and backing up artists who would be touring in the UK. And this is the other thing, that some of the artists that he did back, you had guys like Chuck Berry in there, and just massive blues acts, B.B. King as well. And it would just be Steve as literally a teenager still at school backing up these huge artists, and I'm sure that they would have got him doing backup vocals as well because of the quality of his voice and just being the child prodigy that he was, and then getting into having such a long and successful career throughout music. And this is, I believe, from around 2012, so still having the ability, playing, singing, just one of those top-notch musicians and a legend, as I've put in the title of this video, the legendary Steve Winwood. So thank you guys for joining me on this live analysis. We are going to be doing this again next week, so if you can join me then, that'd be great. Obviously it'll be a different artist, whichever happens to be suggested on my list that is next up. I will tend to organize this the day before, so you guys get a little bit of a warning as to who we're going to be taking a look at. But as with all the analysis videos on this channel, we don't look at any artist and just discount them for any genre. I look at everything, so it will just be a little bit of a lottery as to who's coming up next on next week's live analysis. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and a final look into that live chat room. We've got Velvet in there as well, Robin, Dave, who's been telling some jokes before the live stream started, so thank you for that, Dave. And Sue, Corey, Leanne is in there as well. And I will catch you guys at the next one of these. I hope you've enjoyed it and that you've been able to hear everything that's going on. Fingers crossed it's all coming across, and has come across from that audio perspective nice and clear. And thank you, Jill, as well, for this quick donation of $10, and also Orlando, who's just thrown in the $2 donation. So thank you for that, Orlando, as well. And I'm going to have to call an end to this now, so don't donate anymore because it might not be seen by me. But thank you, everyone, for all of the donations during this live analysis video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and maybe got a little bit more of an appreciation of Steve's guitar ability and the way that he approaches this, combining that picking and also that rhythm on the right hand. But thank you guys for joining me, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!